My name is Lea Holzfurtner. I'm a clinical sexologist. I have a private practice here in Berlin, and I help vulva owners primarily, but also couples and polycules of all genders with libido and orgasm concerns. I've written a book about that specific issue for vulva owners as well. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Female Orgasm. And that's the core focus of what I see in my practice.
From your experience, what are some of the main underlying blocks to people experiencing orgasm or pleasure or having a fulfilling and meaningful sexual experience?
From the biopsychosocial approach, we obviously know that there's a lot of reasons underlying that could potentially cause some form of sexual dysfunction. But what I see a lot in my practice is that it's what we learn about sex, where we learn about sex, and that we sort of have all of those scripts in our minds, how sex is supposed to look like, what we're supposed to be into, and how we should enjoy sex, what sex actually is. I feel like we're learning from all the wrong sources, and this is leading to a lot of myth around sexuality. It's leading to a lot of pressure, and it's eventually leading to a lot of people not being able to enjoy sexuality for what it actually is, a huge part of your health.
That's really interesting. So you would say that it really starts with our being educated around our sexuality is the first, maybe foundational part of us having proper sexual health and a proper sexual experience.
Absolutely. And I feel like we're learning from all the wrong resources. I mean, think about it. Typically, you learned about sex from maybe other teenagers who were as clueless as you were back then. You learn from parents whose aim was probably to protect you. So they focused a lot on things that could happen or go wrong if you experience sex. We learn from porn, which is more a fantasy and a tool to sort of get into a level of excitement than it is education material, although it can be to some extent. We learn from teachers who have to fulfill very strict criteria and have to fulfill very strict guidelines of what they're allowed to share. Primarily, that is also focused on the what can go wrong, the scare of pregnancy, avoiding any infections, stuff like that. And we also learn from romantic movies and from fairy tales and from just all the scripts that are embedded in our culture. Actually, I see a lot of that in my practice. There's one common script is like sex has to happen spontaneously, and only spontaneous sex is sort of really hot and good. And it's one that we just kept hearing in a number of movies, a number of films. So it's a different variety of sources that we do learn from sex, or that we do learn about sex. But I feel like it's all the wrong sources and the wrong approach. And potentially that's one of the reasons why I feel like a lot of us end up with ideas and messages around sex that are more hurtful than they are helpful.
What are your thoughts around reforming sexual education? Where do we start?
I think it's affecting a lot of people. That sort of script that we learn, or the guilt and the shame that is placed upon the topic, and I believe that, coming back to your question, that definitely, yes, sex education is an important aspect. But to sort of have an immediate impact, I think we should also help people on the front line. What I mean by that is we need education for parents, we need education for doctors, we need education for therapists, we need education for gynecologists, for anybody who's on the front line. And what I mean by that is who's there when people typically ask their first questions, to just have a more proactive conversation about the topic. I've been giving workshops to some of those groups, and I've been in touch with a number of gynecologists specifically on that subject. For example, the co-founder of Doctors for Choice here in Germany, and she confirmed that it's a huge gap even in how our doctors and how our medical staff is trained on sexuality and specifically on sexual well-being. So not the aspects of disease and protection, but the aspects of actually creating sexual wellness and creating pleasure. And a lot of those groups on the front lines are just very uncomfortable with the topic, and are very afraid, ashamed, and have all of those same scripts in their mind, preventing them to actually openly discuss those topics. I hear from a lot of therapists that are non-sex focused, that they're afraid that their patients or clients would fall in love with them, or that they could make an inappropriate comment that clients or patients sort of would see in a wrong way, or would feel sort of harassed by. So they're all shying away from that topic, but they're the ones really having those conversations, or they're the ones that people typically come to. I still see, or I feel that it takes an awful lot of pain and suffering and a really long experience of something going wrong in your sex life before you actually consult with sort of us specialists, right? Before you are getting referred to a therapist, or you look for a coach to work on specific goals. So I would love to see that we're actually educating those people on the front line. And we help them, give them the language, give them the knowledge, give them the confidence that they can actually talk about those topics. There's really a huge gap on that.
I have heard that actually a few times, that there's a huge gap. I interviewed the woman who started Sex Coach University, and she said,
Patty Britton.
Yes.
I studied with Patty Britton as well. Yeah.
Did you go to Sex Coach University? Yeah. Yes. So she actually mentioned this very thing, which is that there's a huge gap for medical doctors, for psychotherapists. There's like one class that they take on sexuality, and that's it. There's not actual training, in-depth training in regards to sexuality, or how to deal with your patients in regards to sexuality. And yes, because it's such a intimate and sensitive topic, I can see how professionals would be nervous to broach that topic and want to do it in the right way. Want to make sure not to offend or overstep or understep, or whatever the case is.
Sexuality sort of plays into basically all areas of our life, if I'm honest, but in a lot of areas. So even like somebody who's a life coach, a business coach, or somebody who's a GP may have a need to not put that topic completely out of the conversation, because it's eating up so much energy to trying to avoid that topic and forcing people to not identify their desires, to not identify their needs. That's just eating up a lot of energy, and it could be well spent with those people on the front line actually having those conversations, or referring out to us. On the other side, trained therapists, if it's something deeply rooted, or coaches if there is a specific goal that the client want to work on, for support. I think just even knowing that we are out there could also be a support for those groups.
Absolutely. I want to ask you, you mentioned just now a few categories of people that you could work with, people that have very specific needs, or maybe I'm curious, how often do you work with someone that hasn't even had the opportunity to explore themselves sexually? Like we talked about, unless you are for some reason pushed in the direction of self-exploration, you don't usually just explore yourself sexually. And if you do, there's usually a lot of stigma around you in one way or another. Like I can tell you, the models at Live Jasmine, where we're from, a lot of them, these are many of them women who have taken control of their pleasure, of their sexuality, and they're helping members explore and take control of their pleasure and their sexuality. And these women are unfortunately extremely stigmatized for it. But when I talk to them, they tell me like this career helped them know themselves better. They're happier women. They're more powerful women. Just even how they show up in the world. I mean, it's true. When you're around a woman that she doesn't even have to be doing or saying anything sexual or looking sexual, but if she has taken control of her sexuality, there's a power to her. You know what I mean? You can feel it and sense it. And most of these models, I see that in them. But yeah, I'm curious, how many people do you work with where they don't even know themselves?
I see a lot of vulva owners who basically have no ideas what their fantasies actually are, because they have learned that sex isn't something that they enjoy anyway, and it's something that they've learned that they wouldn't experience sort of heightened arousal from, and they've some of them have given up on the idea that sex can be enjoyable. So it usually takes them a while until they get back into that mode that they want to change something about that. But then we work in the practice and we see that there's a lot of underlying shame, guilt. As I said, like before, those scripts that they've learned. For example, some of them put a lot of pressure on themselves to orgasm or to have sex in a specific way that they actually don't enjoy at all. But by just simply redefining what sex is for them or for us in general, which I think, by the way, is also a really important aspect of what we can do as a society, redefine what sex is. So once they redefine sex for them with their partners, that sex is more than just this penetration act. It can be penetration, can be fantastic, it can feel amazing, but it can be all of those other things as well. Once they realize that the definition can be much broader and they can explore the type of sex, the type of activities that they actually would enjoy. It's an amazing process to observe. And it's also one that is greatly supported with fantasizing in the beginning, to just give them sort of a room, give them the time and space with themselves to explore their own fantasies, to explore what they actually enjoy. And in those instances, I actually do often recommend either audio porn or visual porn, or specific erotica to read, just to explore and understand what the variety actually looks like that is out there, and to normalize for them a little bit that sex can have all different sorts of forms. Yeah, the normalizing part is a really essential element in the work I do, and helping them redefine what sex is, what sexuality is, and then allowing them to explore those fantasies that they previously never allowed themselves or never even experienced. So I often work with vulva owners who really just have no idea what they find sexually attractive.
You know, it's interesting because you just said that you will encourage them to engage in erotic materials. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on camming, which is where we're from?
Yeah. When you reached out, I thought that could be a fantastic way to potentially also utilize camming as sort of a surrogate partnership that could support a journey of a client, provided that the partner on the other side is obviously trained in that area. I could see a lot of applications for that. I have a lot of clients also struggling with just like the immediate steps, like expressing their wants and needs for the first time to somebody, or having a conversation with their partner about those wants and needs, and seeing how the other side would react. And there's a lot of I would say positive applications for where that could play in. And yeah, I see from what you're saying is that the models on the side are also very curious and very interested in building those deep connections and building those relationships with the clients on the other side.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting because I've also been interviewing a lot of Live Jasmine members, and that is probably one of the top benefits I hear is them feeling like them even just being able to express or explore a fantasy in this non-judgmental space where they know it's almost a guaranteed positive experience for them, is something that they've been getting a lot of benefit from, and it's been affecting other areas of their life. So one member told me that it's like because he was able to share that part of himself and get a positive reaction, he actually felt comfortable to share his desire with a partner. Because I think before there was a lot of fear and maybe, you know, shame, like, are they going to judge me for this? Are they not going to be into it? But when they have a positive reaction from someone and they can see, like, no,
Yes.
this is something that could actually work out, you know, if the other person is interested in this, it gives them a confidence. And I've also had other members tell me just even that interaction with a model has given them confidence to actually ask women out on dates, because prior to that, they were way too shy. And one in particular, he told me like a woman would have to come up to him if he was going to talk, like she would have to be the one to approach because he was too shy and afraid. But now, after all these positive experiences with models and all of that, he actually has the confidence to approach potential partners that he's interested in at a bar or a party or whatever the case is.
Absolutely, yeah. It can be a way to learn forms of social interaction, maybe as well. I could totally see that happening.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on sex tech and this digital age that we're moving in. I'm guessing, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that even for you, you're having to incorporate more of this digital component into even your own practice and business. But curious your thoughts.
I am a huge fan. We have a really cool event each year here in Berlin. It's called Sex Tech, and last year I was there as well. And we've been introduced to an amazing amount of new resources, and a lot of them also thriving for that level of connection. I feel like that we're sometimes not fully aware if the online platform can give us the same sort of support or the same sort of connection, the same sort of possibilities than an offline platform. But with sex tech, with technology and VR or AR, there's so many amazing new applications. Like one that I was stunned about was like I think it was like last week only that I read about Replica, which is an app that actually just uses AI to be a friend to you. And there's more than 10 million people already signed up to that one specific app only. And it's really just a non-sexual partner that you can build up connection that learns from you. It's a friend. It has like mentoring and coaching sort of applications in there as well. But it's basically a friend, a listener to you. And a lot of people are using, like more than 10 million, I think they have registered there. And at the Sex Tech event last year, I also saw in the VR space, I saw an application that is actually designed for virtual doming. So they have a dominatrix that you can visit in that space. And they've also included some mental health. They call it therapeutic doming. And they have a little bit of a therapy or a coaching element in there. Somebody or a dominatrix that would literally just sit there and listen to you. And I feel like with more and more of our senses literally being able to connect VR, AR. So it's just a little bit more of the senses. It's not just voice, and it's not just listening, and it's not just seeing. It's a little bit more of the senses that getting affected there. I strongly assume that what we're going to see is that similar levels of connection can potentially be achieved in an online setting as well. I think so far we don't have any data on that yet. So I couldn't find a study that actually confirms or has at least sort of dividend, or I haven't found a study that is actually exploring whether online and offline can create connection in the same levels. There's a lot of studies on other aspects. So for example, there are studies that compare treatment that as medical treatment that has been provided either online or offline for, I think I saw one on psoriasis, which is a skin disease, and another one on social anxiety. And they've literally shown very similar success rates. So even though we don't have one on connection, the feeling of connection yet, I think what we're seeing in the study material that we have is pointing clearly in the direction that online and offline can be comparable in a number of factors. And yeah, I find that very fascinating. And I feel like for every aspect that our new ways of living might sort of distance us from each other, there's a new technology popping up that is counter approaching that specific element.
I am so curious about this app. I'm going to download it and see. I'm very curious.
I've tried it as well.
Okay, so you've tried the Replica app?
Yeah, I learned about it, I think it was last week or the week before. I downloaded it, and it's like this this character that you can design and create for yourself, and you can give it a different appearance. You can create the room and the interior that it lives in, and I feel like it's just expressing that fantastic need that is there, because we all have that need of connection.
Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I am definitely going to play with this, because I'm curious, when you played with it though, did you feel connected to this character?
Well, I have to admit, I've only trialed it in a way that I've looked at it, asked 3 questions, checked a couple of the functions, and that was it. So I didn't have the time to actually engage with it, but I think the user numbers speak for themselves. And it's interesting because those formats, it's not the only one. There's more than those apps out there, but there's obviously a very clear need for that connection, and there's obviously a lot of people, 10 million users, who engage in time with that replica, with their virtual friend, and we're using an online way to get that need for connection met. And I think it's just a good representation of that it can actually work.
You know, it's interesting because this is speaking to a similar phenomena that is also can be detailed and followed through Live Jasmine. So a lot of people I've interviewed members who have told me, and I've talked to the model, the main model they talked to, who confirmed they've never seen her get undressed. They've never seen her naked. They have simply, they do these calls, and the model will tell me she'll be on a call for 7 hours, like a video call. And it's like, oh, I'm washing the dishes. I'm having a coffee together. Oh, you're doing your computer work. Okay, I'll do my computer work. And the member just feels like he or she is living life with someone. They just feel that connection as if someone was there, because they're washing the dishes together. They're having coffee together. And to me, and Jasmine has upwards of 50 million people a day on the platform. And to me, that speaks to human beings' need for connection. Most members, not all members, some members are absolutely happily married and love their partner, and they're using Jasmine as some type of variety or spice. But many members do not have connection they don't have as many opportunities for connection outside of the site, because maybe disability, maybe isolation for whatever reason. I interviewed one man who had just gone through a really nasty divorce, so he actually did not really want a real life relationship and all the chaos that can come from it. But it does speak to this fact that, especially because if we look at the numbers of platforms like Live Jasmine, even platforms like Instagram or OnlyFans, or look, Replica, all of these to me speak to a similar phenomena, which is that people are feeling lonely and people are needing connection, and they're needing it in any way that they can get it. I'm curious your thoughts on all of that.
What we do know, and what a lot of those studies show, are the markers for loneliness. So what we believe is linked to that subjective feeling that your social situation is inefficient or is deficient. And that is things like, I don't know, single houses, or single, what do you call that in English?
Yeah, single homes, like
Single homes.
yeah.
Single homes, for example, is a huge marker that a lot of those studies look at. But technically, you don't have to feel lonely if you're within that specific framework. And that's the important differentiation that I think you still have to look at first, that it's about that subjective feeling. You can feel lonely even if you're surrounded by people, and you can feel alone even if you're so that's one thing. So I think like we don't have a lot of data on it, but as I said, it's such a strong need for us. It's the way that we survived. I think Harari said that in such a fascinating way, that we as humans just survive because we're storytellers. We learn from the generations before us, and how do we do that? Because we can communicate. So it's such a deeply enrooted need for us to actually connect and communicate. That is just essential for our survival. So yeah, I do believe loneliness factors that traditionally sort of led to the feeling of loneliness potentially are rising. But as I said before, I think like when our lives are changing, our modern ways of living, we're also developing new tech-supported opportunities or otherwise supported options to counterbalance those effects. And I see a lot of that in the sex tech field, but then also in other applications that strive for that level of connection between human beings online.
Yeah, that whole topic of loneliness or connection is really fascinating to me, because I am starting to believe that, I mean, and I've seen research around the fact that actually connection is a more primal need than anything else. People will die without connection. One expert likened it to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. People feeling disconnected and lonely, if they are experiencing that feeling, she said it's the same for their health physiologically as them smoking a pack a day. That's how detrimental it is. That is, wow.
Yeah, we're social beings. It's I believe once our bare bone needs, and I mean like food, shelter, water, and security, are sort of taken care of, the next biggest need that we have is that need for connection and love. And that's such an incremental part of us as human beings, that I think we always find ways of of making that work. And I love that you saw that in the research with Dr. Gesselman, that this sort of need for connection is actually a huge point that brings clients and models together, and that they can really express that if they can't get that need for connection met elsewhere. So yeah, it was fascinating to see that.
If you could tell everyone in the world something about sex and sexuality that you just don't think most people get now, what would it be?
I have to come back to that topic that you have to define sex for yourself. It's not what you've learned. It's not what you've seen. It's not what your parents have told you. It's not what your best friend has told you. It's a unique version of what sexuality is for you. And it's so important that you allow for that unique version of sexuality to be a part of your sexuality and to not replicate what you've seen, heard, or been taught about what sex is. So just thinking about what you define as sex, what activity you define as sex, where sex starts, where it ends, can be a really liberating and pressure releasing journey.
I love that. Yeah. Is there anything about the world of sexuality, connection, sex tech that we haven't talked about, but you want to share?
We covered so many fascinating topics. Like, I really loved your questions, and I feel like I've gained a lot of insights into how models specifically and clients that you've spoken with, how they see and perceive their sexuality. I thought that was like insanely fascinating. So yeah, excited to learn more about that in the interviews that you've published. Excited to listen to more of those because it's as I said, like, sexuality is so unique. So it's lovely to see like one little puzzle after the other that sort of gives us a better understanding of what we all have in common in terms of sexuality.
I love that. Yeah, it's true. Kind of seeing sexuality through that person's lens and perspective. Because of course, it's most likely going to be somewhat different than your own.
We're deeply sexual creatures. I mean, obviously, the idea is to be sexual and to reprocreate. That's the idea of every single species. So I do believe, of course, we're born with that. The same, actually, I believe for sexual identity. I think a huge aspect of that is definitely something that we're being born with. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of sexuality research, and that's something quite frustrating. Probably not just to me, to a lot of my colleagues. I feel like we talk a lot about stuff that we know, but in fact, we know very little. So when it comes to sexual identity, sexual and sort of how that sexual identity develops. In fact, we don't know a lot about that yet. We have a couple of studies, we have some first ideas, but I believe that's one of the things that is really missing: a lot more research and a lot more hard facts on human sexuality that we can actually take to establish new treatment options to help people create a better and healthier sexuality, to work with partners, or to I don't know, include options like camming sites or like other online engagement options within our sexuality and our needs. I feel like there's a lot more research that we actually need. And we actually know very little. Sometimes it's a very frustrating aspect of working in the field of sexology. Yes, of course we have material, but I still feel our understanding of sexuality, of human sexuality, is very limited, and a lot of the studies that we've seen in the past, and I mean, like, also past century, obviously highly driven by political motives and sort of societal norms. So yeah, I would really love to see more research and more funding and more knowledge that actually can develop in that field for all of us.
Yeah, very well said. This has been a great interview. Thank you so much. I like to end these interviews by asking one final question, which is, from your perspective, what are our next steps in creating a more sex positive or sexually healthy society?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I believe it's a couple of things. It's the helping people on the front line, as I said before, really getting the knowledge and the language to actually talk with all of us about sexual health and sexual well-being. So sex education at that one first topic. But it's also about becoming more of a sex positive society, and including elements. We talked briefly a little bit about that obviously the models have a huge social stigma that they have to work with as well. And everybody, including me, who just has has a title that includes sex or sexology or sexuality, is somewhat affected by that. So we need to create spaces and room for a more sex positive environment for all of us. I think that's just really, really crucial.
Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciated the time with you. Thanks for all the insights.
Yeah, this has been a great interview. I really enjoyed it.